most career advice you've seen on socials?
Yeah, this is really pertinent, right? Because I've been looking, I suppose, with everything whenever you're sort of, going through YouTube and going through or Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is that your preferred, platform for videos is, things pop up. Obviously, the algorithm is pushing things that you might like, and for me, I get quite a lot of the shorts on YouTube that are for career advice. And there was one that I saw the other day, and it was and I'm not going to name his name, and also I can't really remember, but it was an English guy, I would say probably late 20s, early 30s, seemed to be quite confident, and I was watching it, but he also seemed a little bit, dare I say, smug, and he showed within his video. He showed a video of an older gentleman who's probably late 40s, early 50s, who was complaining about interviewing a younger professional, and said he couldn't. The guy in the smaller video said, "I can't understand why this person's just come in and interviewed with me, and the first thing they asked me about was when's my lunch break. They asked me about how much holiday I get, and they asked a couple of questions like that." And then the guy on the short closed that and started laughing, saying to his audience, which I guess is kind of a younger audience, saying, really making fun of the employer, and saying, no, of course you should ask about the holiday in the interview. Of course you should ask about when you get time off. Of course you should ask about the hours. And I sat there shaking my head going, is this really the career advice that people are getting and listening to? And he had millions of views. I didn't read the comments, but I was a bit flabbergasted. And then I started going through others. And what I realized was that there is an enormous amount of people on YouTube and on other socials that are offering career advice. That was one of the worst pieces of advice I've ever seen. And I would implore anyone listening to this to, if you're in an interview, right, I've said it before and I'll say it again, play the game, right? Make them feel like you want the job at that firm, not that all you're really worried about is how much time you get off. Of course, it is important to know the holiday. Of course, it's important to know the hours that you'll have to work and the lunch breaks and things like that. But my advice would be don't take that advice and ask it in the first interview, because of course, when you're in an interview, the person in front of you wants to know that you want that job and that you want to be there, and that goes for any level of professional, from the most junior job seeker through to the most senior person looking at maybe an interim NED project or whatever it might be. So play the game. Make them feel like you want them, that you want that job, and that your first thought isn't, when am I going to get my sandwich?
So what is really behind a job advert on LinkedIn?
Yeah, this is another thing that job seekers need to know. And obviously we're really focused on the legal market, right? So I'll talk specifically about that. So I'm looking through LinkedIn, and this really came from what I was saying a minute ago about the looking through the socials and YouTube at people giving career advice, some of it which is awful. And I'm looking at these job ads, and obviously every firm, law firm, corporate, whatever it might be, that's looking for a lawyer is trying to put their best foot forward, right? So they're trying to show who they are, that they're a fun place to work, and that you might want to apply for this job. But I look through hundreds per week, and I'm not sure that that a lot of them are telling the true story. And I know I've got to be careful here, but one of the pieces of advice I often give to lawyers is that when you're joining a firm, is to understand the values of the organisation that you're going into. What are their values and how do they portray those values? That is a much more important question to ask in an interview other than when is my lunch break. understanding what those values are, if they can rattle them off to you, and that is a good thing. And then if they can tell you, how they portray that is really, really good. It's a really good sign for a potential firm you're going to join. And I think a lot of the adverts I see on LinkedIn are really just them wonderfully marketed, wonderfully branded videos. And those, the bigger the firm, the bigger the budget. So it usually looks really, really good. But I don't think they tell the true story of what that firm is all about. And that's no fault of the person posting it. There's no fault of the person whose face is on it. But I just would say to everybody who's trusting in a LinkedIn advert, whether it's on the job section on LinkedIn or whether it's just in the feed, I would just be super careful of what you're actually applying for. Find out as best you can by speaking to professionals or doing some research, find out exactly what that firm is all about, and are they exactly what they are portraying. So that is my LinkedIn tip for people, is when they're looking at those job adverts, just do a bit of digging and remember the value question for when you're in an interview. Let us know what your takeaway is from today's video, and if you have any questions about your job search or any comments on this video or past videos, let us know below and we will answer them.
What is really happening in the in-house market currently?
Yeah, this is a really good one, because honestly, I get asked all the time. We are, obviously as a group, we're speaking to hundreds of lawyers across the continent every week. And look, we all know this, because this has been the way it has been forever, is that there is a preferred path for a lot of lawyers is to leave practice eventually and to move in-house for a variety of reasons. Less billable hours, in terms of less focus on the billable hour, maybe more, potentially a more strategic, more senior role, smaller environment potentially, working for a corporate as opposed to a law firm. There's a whole reasons why people come to us, but it is a hugely popular route to go. Now, I'm talking just about the African continent here. There aren't that many jobs in-house. It's that simple. Those at the top, and look, I'm talking to people who are listening to this who know this, but those at the top very rarely move. There's not a lot of general counsels moving around. They tend to stay in those jobs for quite a long time. There's not a huge amount of growth. Now, if you take in comparison two continents, and I know it's hard to compare two continents, but when you look at in-house teams across Asia or Europe are very similar. The in-house teams will be enormous. There'll be 5 to 10 to 20 to 30 to up to 50, maybe hundreds if it's in a bank, right? On the African continent, there might be one who's been there forever. There might be two people in an in-house team. There's very little growth. There's just not as many deals going on here. There's not as much expansion. That's not to say that there won't be in the future, but the in-house legal teams are smaller. They will tend to farm stuff out to their law firms or to alternative legal service providers, or bring in interim lawyers occasionally. There just aren't that many jobs. So we get inundated with requests from brilliant lawyers, but the jobs just aren't there. And until those teams continue, get to the point where they're really expanding, because the companies themselves are doing more deals cross-border or doing more international work, it's just not going to work. It's not going to happen. So I think that a lot of the lawyers that come to us looking for in-house positions don't really necessarily appreciate, maybe they do appreciate, I don't know, but maybe they haven't really done as much research as we have in terms of the size of the teams. There just aren't that bigger teams. There are some, obviously some of the bigger organizations across South Africa and Egypt and Nigeria and Kenya and Morocco, for instance, they are. The banks, etc. They've got big-ish teams, but nowhere near across the rest of the world. So you might want to move in-house, but the jobs just aren't there. And when they do, they're not going to come to companies like us necessarily. The process tends to be this. they'll look internally. Then they'll, and then they'll incentivize from moves internally, especially if they're an international group. Then they'll ask the law firm or law firms that they typically work with, or they'll ask for referrals from friends. Then they'll go to Careers24 and LinkedIn, and once they've worked through all of those people, then they'll contact the agencies if they still need someone. Now, I obviously have my own opinions on that, in the fact that they should probably call us first because we have a 100% record. However, it is worth noting that that is usually the process of how they'll go about finding their next in-house law hire. So my suggestion to anyone looking in-house is try to follow that route. Ask your friends who are in-house if there's any opportunities coming up. Scour the market, look at the job boards like LinkedIn, see what's out there. Remember that you will be up against thousands of people that are going through the LinkedIn process, and we've talked about what happens to your CV when you go through that process. You may never get called again, and then keep talking to us. But certainly, unless we are actively out there, mapping and calling about a particular project, we're unlikely to have those projects.
Okay, so how do you land a job overseas?
Yeah, this is a good question. And actually, it was one, I had a couple of phone calls this week, and obviously we have those recent Legal Unicorns episodes where I interviewed Ruth and Oliver, who both had managed to carve out international legal careers. So I implore anyone to look up those episodes. And I had a couple of phone calls this week from lawyers as well who are looking for that. I wanted to address that now, actually, and actually I might start maybe answering direct questions from people on these weekly sessions. I might start gathering some of these emails that I get where people ask specific questions about things like how do I get a job overseas, and actually just answer them directly. And on that note, how do you get a job overseas? Right, well, it's all, the number one question is relevance, okay? It's a harsh question to ask yourself or answer for yourself, but are you relevant to the market that you're going to go into? And I'll give you an example. If you are a banking or corporate attorney, you could have a fantastic CV. You might be at the best firm in Nairobi, or you might be the best firm in Santon, wherever it may be. Great education, cracking CV. But if you're going to go to London or you're going to go to New York, you might not be relevant for two reasons. Firstly, because London specifically, 400,000 registered lawyers. They've got a load of their own talent in the marketplace as well. So why would they necessarily have to look outside of that? And secondly, relevance in terms of the deals that you've been doing. It's not unfair of me to say that the African markets have got smaller deals than what you would be doing and working on in London or New York. So they might look at that and go, well, it's the right type of deal, but it's just not big enough for what we're doing. So you've got increased wonderful competition who's on the ground already, and the relevance of the types of deals that you've been doing. So, but once you've answered that, then you start to find your angle that you can take. South Africans especially, and I'll speak for one relatively transient nation, they will move. So overseas firms will look. They typically come in at a cheaper rate than what is locally available. So even with visas and flights and relocation, it stacks up from a monetary perspective. So these are the first 2 pointers in terms of how to get your job overseas. Once you've sat there and looked at your CV and gone, am I really relevant to this market? You start looking at all the other markets. It could be offshore, could be America, could be Australia. And then you start to realize, okay, that's where I should be heading with my CV. Once you've done that, then you start to form a plan, and then your determination will get you there.
What's going on at GRM this week?
Yeah, good. Well, so I've been sitting here promising for the last few weeks that there's things happening and announcements and coming as well. And whilst I can't give too many of the details away, we have our events team has just signed the contract for a pretty big event coming up at the end of June, which will be we're putting it on for the University of Johannesburg. What I can say at this moment is it will be a UJ event. It'll be hosted there. It's going to be enormous. It's going to be about combating corruption in the corporate sphere across South Africa. There have been these types of two-day summits before, but nothing like this. We were approached by UJ to put this on, and the first conversation I had with their senior execs was, I've seen 4 or 5 of these in the last couple of years. What's going to be the difference? Now, again, not being mean to the other corruption or anti-corruption conferences that there have been across South Africa before, but those have tended to be a little bit more like, okay, corruption's happening, we should really do something about it. With this one, it is, what are we going to do about it? What is the roadmap? Here's the strategy. And it's going to be again, I can't mention any names yet, but those that are speaking will be ex-presidents, top business people in the marketplace, the names that we read about every day. It'll be 400 of the top VIP business owners and CEOs and chairpersons across the country from all of the industries, all of the names all of the JSE listed firms, and it will be the who's who of politics, media and business in one room for 2 days to talk about exactly what is going on and how corporate can work together to rid corruption from corporate South Africa. So instead of the fluffy, nice, we really ought to do something about this, this event is going to be the VIP event of the year where decisions will be made and strategies will be rolled out to once and for all rid corporate South Africa of corruption. I cannot wait. I'm so pleased that we've been selected to put this on. There'll be more details following, official announcements, massive media campaign. But yeah, our events team is already busy and we're going to be in Joburg next week to start the ball rolling. So watch this space, dates released soon. So that's happening. We're also up there meeting a few more clients because we've just taken on more projects in the law firm space, in the corporate commercial space, private equity and litigation. These are growing. Tax is growing. Again, I feel like I'm a broken record, but these are areas that are growing and growing and growing. And yeah, from a GRM perspective, our teams are settled in nicely. I have a heap of travel coming up, which is going to take in Johannesburg, Dar es Salaam, Nairobi, London, in May, Riyadh, in October, Dubai, and then back to Kenya as well. And in amongst that will probably be other trips as well. And a lot of that is reflecting the work that's going on across the African continent in law firms and corporates, and the sort of the combining of the Middle East region alongside North, East and South Africa as well. So a heck of a lot of stuff going on, not just the event, which obviously we'll release more data on, but yeah, no, good times ahead.